So I want to record a video talking a little bit about some advice that I want to share, maybe just from my own experience, from what I've spoken to with other people, on how to increase your activity without having massive crashes or flare-ups. You know, what's the best approach to take towards increasing activity again on the recovery path. I talk a lot about how to deal with the flare-ups and with the crashes and with the symptoms, and how to accept it, how to surrender into it. And then what's the best way to increase activity around that? So one thing that I feel is really important here is that it's not just about push and deal with the consequences. We don't want to overwhelm the nervous system to the state where it's just too difficult to not identify with the stress and the fear. So it's okay if we feel overwhelmed. Like at the same time, you know, if there's deep despair and hopelessness and overwhelm, allow yourself to feel that. It's important to take away the thoughts saying, I can't go there, I mustn't feel this is too much, this is dangerous. There can be a lot of fear around feeling intense emotional experiences because we've learned to try and pace ourselves and stay away from something that's going to overwhelm us. So I want to, you know, just talk about both sides of this. Is what's here is here, and it can be really helpful to soothe yourself, but at the same time allow yourself to feel it. Like, it's okay, you know, you can, you don't need to force the door closed on any emotional experience, on any thoughts, on any, like specifically if we can learn how to be with negative emotions and negative thoughts without fighting with it, you know. So there's a difference between identifying with negative thoughts and getting stuck in a negative thought loop and really limiting beliefs, that kind of stuff. So that's, you want to not identify. But when I learned how to be able to experience the negative emotions like loneliness and fear and guilt and shame without having to try and fix it, just allowing myself to feel it, to feel the fullness of that experience, it was such a relief to me. It was such a relief to take that pressure off having to try and reject a part of my own experience, you know, feeling into my nervous system, into myself, that this is wrong, this shouldn't be here. Like, that's stressful because it is here. So what is the best way to deal with it if it's here? Is to accept it fully. Give it space. Let it be exactly what it wants to be. So that's how to deal with it. But then what I was saying about the increasing activity, the best approach, I think, is to do it like in a way that's not going to overwhelm you. And at the same time, focusing on activities that are going to be soothing for you and your nervous system. So I was spending a lot of time in nature. I think nature is such a easy tool to use to kind of help us, you know, change your environment, and that will have an effect on your nervous system. If I think back to even on my difficult days, if I could, you know, if I was dealing with quite a flare-up of symptoms, if I could just go and sit in nature somewhere, change my environment, as opposed to staying stuck in my apartment where it was very challenging a lot of the time, that would just have a relieving effect. Just getting out, seeing a different part of the world. So do that if that's possible, you know. Always I want to say is like, find how to integrate this stuff in your own circumstances with everything you've got to deal with. You will find your way. But yeah, don't try and rigidly apply the way I did something. But yeah, I'm just sharing suggestions here. So walks in nature is like, if you can increase activity with something that is soothing for the nervous system at the same time, that's a great like little synergy going on there. It's like, okay, I want to broaden my horizons. I want to recondition my nervous system to do things that I've been afraid of for a long time, that for a long time were too much. And it's absolutely okay if we've needed to rest a lot, pace ourselves, take some space to just be. And now we want to grow our boundaries. So then to do that with something that is going to be beneficial to the nervous system in some aspect at the same time is really great. So yeah, I was spending a lot of time trying to, get more outdoors, be in nature when I was doing a walk. And then some other aspects of it was, I would say in the morning, a morning routine I had at one point in my recovery journey, which was really working nicely for me, was get up, get outside, get some sunshine, don't just stay in my house all the time. And I was living close to the beach, so I would go down, and I wanted to do some cold water exposure because it was something that I did before I was getting into cold exposure, before the whole long COVID chronic illness journey really hit in. And then there was a period of a year where I didn't, because I was too afraid of overwhelming my nervous system. And, that was fine. I needed to experience everything that came along with closing down my life. As challenging as that experience was, it brought a lot of important, deep, dark stuff to the surface that had to come out at some point. And a quick aside here from the cold water, but that that stuff coming to the surface was really important, because it was there, in my nervous system, in my body, like deep emotional things that I wasn't even aware of, that when my circumstances became so challenging, so overwhelming, I just had to feel this complete kind of breakdown. And I always want to reiterate that it's okay if we find ourselves in that place. That's a lot of the stuff that I try and focus on, is just letting people know that it's okay to give space to the deep, scary emotional experiences, because that's half the stress, is the thoughts around it. I mean, that's almost 99% of it, is that I shouldn't feel this. So that's one thing. But when I'm talking about growing my boundaries, I was doing cold water exposure, getting back into it, and I would go down to the beach, and first thing I would do is I would do some stretches. And I think that was really helpful, is it would really help to kind of relax my nervous system and my body quite a lot. I would get out of the thinking, stressing, trying to manage all my symptoms in the head. That's where it's inherently stressful, is like reacting to whatever little sensations going on in the body. What does this mean? Is this dangerous? There's like hyper-vigilant mode, which leads to our body, being stuck in stress, hyper-alert, sympathetic nervous system response, fight or flight, freeze, whichever one we want to talk about. Getting into the body with some stretching really helped to break that barrier from me and the difficult sensations. It was like a way to feel into some pain, like a deep stretch. You want to react out of it. You want to jump out of it. Okay, that's too much. I don't want to stretch that deeply. But if we can relax into the pain, so this is kind of a subtle point, but it makes a world of difference. It's I would focus on breathing into the discomfort. So say I was stretching my hamstring, because I've got notoriously tight hamstrings. So even the smallest hamstring stretch could be quite painful. I would feel into that pain, relax. Can I hold it? Can I stay there? And breathe into it until I'm kind of getting out of my head and just feeling that pain really directly. And then I would start to notice some things about pain, that it's intense, but 99% of the suffering is around the resistance to it. So this was great practice for me. And then there's another benefit, directly related to the nervous system, is that doing deep stretching and holding it for a while and breathing into it and relaxing into it, if you can really get the feel of that, can I hold a stretch and relax into it? Just practice it. Actually activates a parasympathetic response in our nervous system. There's a great podcast, Andrew Huberman. I'm sure a lot of people know about him. He did a podcast a while back that I listened to on stretching, and he kind of mentioned this paper that had found this parasympathetic response to holding a stretch and how it activates certain neurons in the brain. And I was like, yeah, I can totally, like, I found that in my own experience that I would relax after doing deep stretching, feeling into it. So that's cool. There's some science. It's a cool podcast if you want to listen to it. And then I would go for a cold dip in the ocean or wherever I was. But yeah, when I was doing this routine stretching and then go for a dip in the water, that was another beneficial soothing activity for my nervous system. Being in the cold water, it's kind of a similar thing to the stretching. It's like really intense, depending on how cold the water is. So for me, that was depending on what time of the year it was, because here in the summer, the water is really warm. So I can't really do the cold exposure in the same way that I can do in the winter. But depending on how cold the water is, it can really be so intense at first. It's like you're getting into the cold water and our natural reaction is like, oh my gosh, this is so cold. This is too much. I can't deal with it. Got to get out. And then if we just kind of don't react to that and just like, maybe just, I would always do some like breathing, like come back into the body, slow down my breathing, untense my muscles, and then go more into the water. And there's so many benefits to this. It's like, one is we're kind of training our body to remain calm in like an inherently stressful environment. But the good thing is this is like a eustress, like it's a kind of a stress on the body, but it has a lot of beneficial impacts on the nervous system at the same time. Again, I also got introduced to cold exposure, or I got a lot more interesting facts about cold exposure from one of Huberman's podcasts on cold exposure. There's some cool stuff there as well. So if you're interested in all the sciencey-ness behind it, but yeah, there's a lot of benefits, to the nervous system from it. And one of the reasons I actually started doing cold exposure was to try and give me an energy boost. And it really helped because it was in a period where I was in a really demotivated, depressed state. And there's like big dopamine kick that we get from cold exposure, but that one that lasts for quite a while. So that was one thing. I was like, okay, I need this. So there's that. And just kind of introducing activities that are going to be enjoyable, but in a soothing way for you. Like how can I step out of my boundaries in a manageable way, and at the same time it's beneficial for me and my nervous system. Going for walks, light exercise at first, and then increasing it as you deal with the fears that come up, as you start to get out of your head more. Whatever activity I was doing, orienting out of being in my head was probably key so much. So what I mean by that is, like, when I first started trying to introduce exercise, and light activity, whatever you want to call it, I would be in my head. I'd be so kind of nervous and reactive to what was going on in my body, kind of in the head, looking that hypervigilant state that I was talking about earlier. Then if I could go for a walk or a cycle, and because I was doing a lot of meditation, I'll say this was really helpful, is to do meditation, then that can carry over into other activities, right? So that's an important aspect. The more I would often do meditation and then go and do some activity, and then I would notice the difference between doing a short cycle, like really easy at first, and reacting to whatever, or after being more present and just like, oh, can I come back to the body sensations? Can I notice my breathing while I'm cycling? Can I, and then really exploring like the senses in a deeper way, along with kind of some self-inquiry. So the Waking Up app, which I've mentioned before, there's some really cool inquiries there around like non-dual exploration, which can be very confusing and make no sense at first, which is absolutely fine. But I'm mentioning it because it was a part of my experience. I've spoken about in some of my videos the deeper insights around self, around awakening, seeing through the sense of self. And yeah, one of the things that I was exploring a lot was exploring that in the visual field. So the Waking Up is a great place. Waking Up app is a great place to start. For me, that was my introduction into all of this. And then like meditation and then the deeper aspects. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This is interesting. This is weird. But yeah, I would get taste of it. I would be like, if the more I look at, as I'm cycling, is the world coming towards me? Am I moving through the world? What is the sense of the one who's seeing? The one looking for the looker in the visual field, in everything I'm seeing, what is the sense of self here? And then can I see that I can't see where I'm looking from? So this is an aside. If this doesn't make sense, that's okay, but I want to explore this if anybody's interested. Can I look for where I'm looking from? And then I see that I don't see my head. It's one way of doing this inquiry. And then can I just rest in what I can see? Can I rest my attention in the visual field? This can take practice, depending on how much meditation we've done, how much we've explored these concepts, these inquiries. But it is something that's accessible to anybody. You just explore your sense fields in a different way. And for me, the reason I'm talking about this, because then when I could start to introduce exercise, I could actually be really relaxed while doing exercise, as opposed to being really concerned about my activity level and my, how much I was exerting myself and the consequences and what that was going to mean about symptoms and all of that. So learning to kind of deeply explore the present moment, I suppose, that's always kind of a cliche thing, because there's so much like pop spirituality and mindfulness culture nowadays, and that's fine. That's great. I actually think there's a lot of benefits to that. But yeah, we can think like, oh, I must be in the present moment. I must be in the present moment, without really realizing what that means. Is like, oh, my whole world of past, future, me is all in thoughts. And if I come back to the present moment, none of that actually exists. That's quite a deep thing to really realize. And it might not make sense at first, but to realize that if I really come into what's here right now without added mental concepts, explore that. What is it? And it takes some time to go deeper with this. But eventually we can really get caught. And for me, I have to mention this when I talk about my recovery, because it was a really big aspect of it, was meditation, deep insights around non-duality. And it comes with deep, if you look at my previous video, it's about some of the fears that will come up as our mind struggles with letting go of the way we were orienting in the world. So yeah, there's ups and downs for sure, and that's fine. So to go back to what we were talking about in this video, if you can kind of find that, this is what's important, is it's not like there's a perfect formula. It's about kind of the way we approach this in one sense. Don't come at it from the really stressed out state of I have to increase activity level in the perfect way. Often I've spoken to people, often they realize that their capacity to do things is very different as opposed to when they're in a stressed out state. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and she mentioned how some days she's okay to do a bit of exercise, and it actually is beneficial. And then some days, because of other stresses or something coming up, suddenly that activity triggers so much more symptoms and flare-ups than it did on another state. And I think that's very relevant, like seeing how it's got a lot more to do with the state that our nervous system is in, and the way, if we're in a stressful state from something else, then maybe we're going to kind of struggle with some increase in activity now, because we're in this natural state where our nervous system is perceiving things as a threat and dangerous, and we're just in this stress mode. So there's that aspect of it. And then another thing that I think is really important is to balance out your increase in activity. So increase activity in a way that's helpful to you, that's not overwhelming. So like start with a 10-minute walk, and then a 15-minute walk, and then a 20-minute walk over a time period that works for you. push the boundaries, but balance it out with activities that are going to be nurturing and soothing and nourishing, like meditation. Like for me, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but if I look at it like this, like when I was increasing activity and crashing, when I initially started to increase activity, it didn't go well for me. I was super excited, but it was such a roller coaster. I was like, okay, I think I'll get the grasp of this mind, body, my nervous system. I just need to kind of deal with my reactions. Pacing was still helpful, but not in the fear state that I used to do it from. Okay, so I'm going to increase activity. But then when I would have a flare-up, I didn't know how to deal with the flare-up. So that's for me what's key, is like you can increase activity and you maybe will have a flare-up. But if you can deal with that flare-up in a different way of not distraction and avoidance, but sitting and meditating and allowing and holding space and feeling without trying to control or manage or fight with our experience. It's like, okay, if I'm feeling stress from my activity, I'm feeling stress. But then not reacting to that with, oh, okay, I need to do something to get away from this experience. I need to distract myself with this and this and this so I don't feel this discomfort. That's the combination that's key for me, is like increase your activity level and manage it. And, you'll see it can be exciting, it can be great, and there will be ups and downs. But if you can balance that out with, cutting out the kind of the behaviors that are putting us up in our head and like to get away from the body, but then that's also draining our energy. Like being up in the head and reacting to thoughts and being stressed out and trying to control everything is exhausting. It's exhausting. So giving ourselves time to come out of that, with stretching and meditating and the cold shower. For some people, it's EFT tapping, the emotion work, all the other things I talk about on my channel. I would do like lymphatic drainage massages, which would really help when I was having a lot of brain fog, when I was stuck in the head, kind of gently massaging around my head and then down the body would really help to shift all of my like intense energy and in the brain fog in the head to like getting into the body and not being stuck in thoughts. So yeah, balancing out your increase in activity with kind of soothing for the nervous system, decompressing, I think is really, really helpful. And yeah, I want to empower you to know that you will find your way through this. And you will find your own way. It's like I'm sharing things from my journey, but it's never going to be exactly the same as me. It's like maybe if something I mention here or there can like click something for you, and you're like, oh, I can do it this way, I can do it that way, and then find out how your situation is different to mine. You know yourself better than me, so trust yourself. But don't believe the thoughts. So when the doubts come, see that that's a thought. The thought saying, maybe I can't do it in my situation. Maybe Kyle had it easier. That's just doubt. Maybe I'm talking a load of shit. I mean, who knows? Maybe I am. But that's doubt. Your mind's gonna produce doubt that we have to see and not identify as. And then realize that you have the capacity to do this if you really trust your own instinct, and you'll know when you're on the right path. You'll feel it. You'll get a taste of it. And sometimes being on the right path means dealing with some deep stuff, and that's fine. You have the capacity for this. I just want you to know that you have the can't say this word, capacity to handle whatever life throws at you. And it's an opportunity to expand your ability to hold something, to open the door to something. So yeah, do this in a not too a serious manner. Introduce something that's kind of goes along the lines of I was saying, like, let me try this. Going out for a friend, socializing is a mix of this, but I do remember the first time I socialized with a friend, it was like, wow, really cool. And then there was ups and downs and all that. But just have a more kind of lighter approach to this. Don't be too serious. I understand the challenge around this. When you're struggling, it's very hard not to take this seriously. But the more seriously I try to take myself, the more I suffered, the more I struggled. It was like if I could laugh at myself, if I could see my own kind of thoughts, my own reactions, my own overreactions, and just see like, oh my gosh, look at how the mind's responding. Look at my thoughts. Like, that's just thoughts. Whereas in the past, we would take it so seriously, like, oh shit, this, I have to focus on this thought, that, this. It's so challenging. Like, I have so much compassion for anybody who's struggling. So yeah, just kind of, if you can, like, take a bit of burden off yourself and introduce some joy where you can, and have compassion for the part of you that's struggling. Like, and try to introduce a smile. It doesn't have to be a fake smile, because like often that can be exhausting, is trying to, put on this fake smile around people all the time. But like a smile from the heart, just while you're walking or while you're sitting, while you're meditating. I would do this a lot while meditating. Can I find a smile in my body, from the heart, a smile in the mind? What does that feel like? And it would have quite just a sudden relaxation in the body, as I don't take myself too seriously, as I relax a bit. And it's a little, like that's part of the compassion. The more I would rest in these kind of experiences, like, okay, can I have some compassion for me who's struggling, for everybody who's suffering? And I wish them to just be free of that suffering. Can bring a little bit of lightness, and you can carry yourself differently. It's really helpful. So all the best.